So for about 2 weeks, they were washing by hand the case carts and wiping out the pans and running them through the washer. And they were all complaining about, yeah, our back is killing us. I was like, well, you appreciate the equipment now, don't you? Yes. Okay. Flipped it back on the following week. I hated to do that, but I needed to get my team to understand, like, it's a piece of equipment, but you have to treat it with respect.
Rising above the buzz of ultrasonic cleaners and the clanking of stainless steel are the ideas and voices that are changing an industry. You're listening to the Beyond Clean podcast, the central nexus for the people, processes, and products that are improving our sterile processing world. Each week, we speak with frontline technicians, CEOs, engineers, and entrepreneurs with a common goal: to help you fight dirty, every instrument, every time. Whether you're tuning in for education or inspiration, we're glad you did. Now turn on those washers and turn up the volume. It's time to go beyond clean.
What's going on, Sterile Processing Universe? This is Bobby Parker, host of the Beyond Clean podcast. You are listening to Season 32 SPD Fact Check. We are going on a journey through sterile processing, looking at common misconceptions and knowledge gaps, and it is good to be back with you in studio this week. Joining me again for this episode and all season long is our co-host for the season, Jamie Amaya. Jamie, welcome back to the studio.
Thank you so much for having me, Bobby. It's a pleasure to be here always.
Yeah, well, I'm excited to have you on as on this side of the mic for the rest of the season. You gave a really great interview last episode on robotics. We dubbed you the robotic whisperer and got to know you a little bit more. But yeah, I'm looking forward to a season full of fun, getting to explore some other SPD topics with you here in the studio. So thanks for agreeing to join me.
Yeah, of course. It's always fun to put yourself out there and be vulnerable, in these types of situations. But I'm looking forward to it. And yeah, the robotic. I almost called myself the horse whisperer, but yeah, the robotic whisperer. I'm both.
Right. That's right. Well, yeah, we did talk about horses some in that episode too. Hey,
Yeah.
if for the folks listening in, if you didn't catch that episode, go ahead and add that to the queue, or hit pause now and go listen to Jamie's episode if you want to get to know a little bit more about her. If I've learned anything about myself over the last couple of seasons here at Beyond Clean, I'm definitely helped by having some other perspectives. And so, Jamie, I'm looking forward to hearing some of your experiences in sterile processing as we go through. Today's episode, though, we're talking cart washers. This whole season is about knowledge gaps and misconceptions. And I don't know if there is a more misunderstood or maybe misutilized piece of equipment in decontam than the cart washer. Some of these modern pieces of equipment can do some wild and crazy stuff. But I don't know that they're utilized all that well, or the departments that wish that they had them have considered all the factors that there are to consider around cart washers. So we're bringing in a sterile processing director who's had a lot of varied experiences with cart washers to give us the full rundown on the equipment. So we will be right back with Angus Bruce, Enterprise Director for SPD out of Boston's Children, to talk to us about cart washers right after a short break.
From the studios of Healthcare HQ, you're listening to Beyond Clean, the global voice of sterile processing.
And joining us now in studio again is our old friend Angus Bruce. Angus, it's good to have you here in studio. Thanks for joining the show.
Well, thanks for having me.
Absolutely. It's been a little while since we've had you on. I think the last episode that we had you on the podcast, at least, was back in our instrument tracking season, talking about generational differences and working with computers and SPD. Good little plug there for folks to go back and listen to that conversation. It was a good episode. But because it's been so long, why don't you get us started here? Introduce yourself. Tell us a little bit about what you've been doing in the industry.
Sure. My name is Angus Bruce. I am the Enterprise Director for SPD at Boston Children's Hospital in Boston. Pretty much what I've been doing the last couple of years since I've been on here is just trying to create a positive relationship between the SPD and the OR, bring in new technology, advance the education, develop my leaders, all the stuff that, us leaders are tasked to do when we have these high functioning departments.
Yeah. Angus, anytime that we're talking with somebody on the show who's really doing the thing out there and sterile processing is growing and making a big impact in the space, we love to ask them a little bit about what their career journey has looked like. There's a lot of different ways that you can grow in sterile processing. We've talked to folks up to and including CEOs of health systems who started out in SPD. Some would go the education route, some end up on the vendor side, and then others end up as an enterprise director, which sounds like something straight out of Star Trek. You want to give us like a thumbnail of what it is that you do, and I guess more specifically, how'd you get there? Like, did you ever think that enterprise director is where you were headed with?
No. So let me tell you, my first job was working at a Toyota dealership. My uncle was a master mechanic, and I thought I was going to be a mechanic until I got into a healthcare program, and I got exposed to SPD by accident. And that's where I said I wanted to do my internship. And I did my internship and I learned a lot, to the point where, at the end of the internship, they offered me a job. And I've been working in SPD since I've been 16. I've worked in every single role they've had, from distribution to regular tech to supervisor, educator, manager, and now director. So it's been a long time, but I can truly say I appreciated having had the time, putting in the time to learn all of those functions. The other thing too with that is that I also worked at a lot of places because, most of us moonlight in SPD because, SPD is not one of those jobs that pay everybody a ton of money. So I moonlighted at a lot of different places just to kind of, one, get the extra cash, but two, figure out what works, what doesn't work. And, you take a little from each place and then you kind of mold something into what works. And that's what I did over the years.
Yeah. Well, it ends up being really valuable experience for applying for a job like what you're doing today. And also part of the reason why we love talking with folks who have been in the industry for a while, because you've got a lot of experience to draw from. Before we keep rolling, I'll just underline one thing that you said, that you kind of ended up in SPD on accident. And isn't that the truth for all of us? I don't think any of us have found sterile processing on purpose, but once you're in it and kind of catch the bug for keeping patients safe and the technical side of the job, it never leaves you.
You're in it. You're in it for good.
Right.
That's for sure.
We're in it.
Yeah.
Well, so Angus, our topic today that we wanted to talk with you about is all about cart washers. Now, this season is about knowledge gaps and misconceptions in sterile processing. And there's more depth to cart washers than just having one. So we've got a lot of questions for you today, to go deep on the good, the bad, and the ugly of cart washing. So why don't you get us started at just the level of definitions? I mean, everybody here probably knows what a cart washer looks like and what it is, but maybe could you talk us through, like, what are some of the benefits and the capabilities of having a cart washer? Like, what's possible for you when you've got a cart washer in the department?
Well, I'll tell you, cart washers have come a long way.
You don't say.
I would tell you, when I first started out doing it, I was working at a place where they had a pit in the room next to decon, and you will roll the carts over and you wash them down. That was our initial cart washer.
Wait,
with
a
the
hose?
big pressure washer gun kind of thing?
We had a steam pressure gun. We had a water hose, and you had the detergent, and you would manually do that.
Wow.
Yeah.
You put the galoshes on and everything.
Yeah. And when I tell people that story, they laugh. They're like, "Are you serious?" I'm like, "Yeah, there was a pit, literally a pit they had."
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. But now you've seen the evolution of cart washers. I remember that was the first time I started, and I've seen it went from the pit to the tunnel cart washers, now to the single chambers, and then back again to the tunnel cart washers. So I'm seeing the evolution of the cart washer from the beginning to the end, and then recycling again. Now the cart washers are a little more complex, where now you can run instruments in them. Right. And it's a game changer for some places, because the volumes, it helps with volumes. You can use it as an emergency throughput. If your washers go down, you can say, okay, my washers, validated to do this. My washers are down. I'm not going to panic. I can run stuff through as long as I, make sure I'm done my testing and all that stuff. So yeah, cart washers now it's one of those tools that people really never thought about it until like the last 5 or 6 years, really. It's an important tool in the SPD department.
It is. Nobody actually thinks about a cart washer. And like you said, with the whole idea of running instruments through it, right? But on the flip side to that, what do you do when your cart washer doesn't work? Hey, what if they all go down at the same time? But really, a cart washer, when it stops operating, whether it's a water issue or a mechanical issue, then what do people do?
Roll them back out to the pit.
You better get that hose working.
It's the rolling up the sleeve and that manual labor back at it again. Yeah. I worked at a place where we had 2 cart washers, and the cart washers would go down, and they would go down because of how they were being used. And we did a lot of training, like we did week after week of training, and then people would still misuse the cart washer. So I intentionally, and I'll deny I did this, I intentionally told the tech to repair it, but say it's not repairable. We shut it off because I wanted to teach the folks a lesson about respecting the equipment and treating it the way it should be treated. Yeah. So for about 2 weeks, they were washing by hand the case carts and wiping out the pans and running them through the washer. And they were all complaining about, our back is killing us. I was like, well, you appreciate the equipment now, don't you? Yes. Okay. Flipped it back on the following week. I hated to do that, but I needed to get my team to understand, like, it's a piece of equipment, but you have to treat it with respect. It's a vital part of what they're doing, and what they were doing was not correct. And all the training that we did, retraining, they still will not follow the process.
Yeah, that's hardcore, Angus. You're like, Pharaoh over there. You don't get any straw for your brick making. No,
I may or may have not done the exact same thing. I will never admit that, but you need respect. You need respect.
It's on the air now. There's no denying it at this point, Angus. So I hear what you're saying. Treating the equipment well and being grateful for it. Man, nothing kills morale like finding out that piece of equipment is down because it's hard. And it's not just the fact that we have to do physical labor, but part of the nuance of what Jamie was asking about downtime procedures is like, how do you even do it? If you've got these big closed case carts and your plan is, some disinfectant wipes or a spray that you have to, wipe down with, like, how do you get the wheels? How do you get the back corners? How do you get up underneath the shelves? Like, it's not as simple as just saying, wipe the thing down. Like, got any advice for that manual process to do it safely?
Yeah. You connect with your infection control, right? Your infection control department, when things like that happen, you should be calling them up right away and making sure that whatever process you're going to put in place or the manual cleaning, they're okay with that. And they're not seeing something that you're not seeing. Yeah.
Okay. Talk us through, and I'm going to be real. The cart washer that I have at one of my facilities is just the cart washer, right? It puts a little bit of soap here, rinses it off, puts some heat to it, and pushes it through. However, I just opened a brand new tower, and I got one of those fancy cart washers where you can run instruments through. So how do you, what's that selling point? Like, I just told him I want the latest and the greatest. That's how I got the cart washer. I said, I just want the latest and the greatest, whatever you can give me, let's take it. But how do you then, like, what are those selling points? Like, how do you sell even infection control or your operating room leaders that, hey, this cart washer can actually wash instruments, because their mentality is cart washer, it washes carts. What am I putting instruments through here? So how do you get that selling point to stick with certain individuals?
Well, it depends on your institution. Like, for example, if you only have a certain amount of washers, and if your washers go down, how are you going to wash, right? You can sell it to them as that this is the backup to our washers in case they go down. You can also sell it to as if we have high volume days and all of our washers are going, so we don't get a backup in decon, this can help with throughput as well. So it just depends on your situation. Not all cart washers are equal. They're not all equal. So I tell people, you research, you go site visits, you see how the cart washer is being used, and you make sure that whatever product or cart washer you select, it's going to fit into the space you have. A lot of people make the mistake and they buy things and they never really did the research, and then they realize that, oops, the plumbing doesn't line up. These new cart washers that have these cycles on them for instruments, the ductwork, depending on which machine you get, it has to have a certain type of ductwork. So all of that research needs to be done before you.
Critical water, I would imagine too, right?
Yep. And let's face it, we have a lot of SPD departments across the country that are pretty old.
Oh, yeah.
So there has to be a lot of research done, and they have to bring in stakeholders, meaning like, your engineering folks, your design planning folks, all of those people, infection control. You got to bring all those people in, and when you're looking at selecting a piece of equipment. We all want the latest and greatest, but we got to make sure it is right for the facility.
Well, it's definitely easy when you're building a new one, right? So
yes,
implementing, taking one out and putting one in. Yeah, you definitely have to look at that. You have to actually, going back to critical water, is what's your capacity, right? Because some critical water, you don't have the tank capacity. You're trying to feed washers and sinks, and now you're going to implement it into a cart washer. But going back to instruments, so what's that workflow look like? Like, how do you then determine, like, is it a determination of what goes through it? Or are we just saying, hey, if we're bottlenecking, let's do X, Y, Z? How do you implement a workflow on what actually, how do you deviate, right, from a washer to the cart washer when it comes to the instrumentation?
That's a communication thing there. So the leaders in the department, or the leader of the department, needs to sit down with his frontline soldiers, or his supervisors, as I would say, and come up with a plan like, okay, this is our plan. If this goes down, this is what we're going to do. These are the items that are only going to go through the cart washer. And everyone has to be on the same understanding as that. And it helps to have that too written down in the SOP, downtime procedures, your SOP when things go down. You can revert back to those SOPs and say, okay, here's the plan. This is what we're doing. And everyone's on the same page.
Yeah. No, that is, communication is definitely key in all of our work. So
it is. Believe me, I had 3 high-level meetings this weekend, and the emphasis was on
communication.
So,
nice.
It does make or break.
Yeah. You guys mentioned installing that cart wash. It's important to think about the requirements and the size and the features of it. And Jamie, you mentioned new construction. I actually led a department through a construction process, and we were getting, of course, a brand new cart washer, and in the area that we were building out had a bunch of pillars in it. And as they were doing ceiling clearance and figuring out where the equipment goes, there was really only one spot in the whole space where the cart washer could go. And so that's where we started from. It's like, okay, this is where decontam has to go because the cart wash has to go there. And we designed the whole department around the cart wash because it's that big piece of equipment. Angus, as you're thinking about implementing a workflow and all that communication and making a decision around whether or not you're going to run instruments through your cart wash, if you decide to do that, like we're going to be a department that, typically the example that gets thrown out are vendor trays. You get a big knee revision coming through and you want to put, 14 knee trays through the same washer at the same time. And we're going to use our cart washer for that. Is there any consideration or changes about how you set up or maintain your cart washer if you know you're going to be using it as an instrument washer like that?
Well, first, you got to make sure that it's programmed properly. You have the right chemistries in there. Secondly, just like the washers, you have to load things a certain way. So you got to make sure that whatever you're loading into the cart washer, you're loading it according to the manufacturer's instructions. So you don't want to start overpacking, because I've seen people stack things. And I'm like, it doesn't work that way. I've seen that, and it made me cringe. And then afterwards I said, all right, you're going to rewash that. That did not get washed. So lots of communication. You sit down with your team, you walk through the process, you run through the process, you make sure your machine is properly programmed. And then there's the testing piece, making sure that you're routinely testing your machine. If this is what you decide to do with this machine, you got to make sure it's passing the routine test.
Yeah, treat it like a regular washer, right?
Yeah,
at that point.
It becomes an instrument washer at that point. Chemistries is an important one to point out, because a lot of times, your cart washer, it's pulling through plungers chemistry out of big bottles that you have set up for washing carts. If you decide you're going to be a facility that's just going to do overflow instrument washing, maybe we're going to run an instrument cycle, once a month or whatever, think about the size of detergent bottle you decide to put on there, because it would not be crazy for that detergent bottle to expire sitting in the detergent room with the plunger in it, because you're using it so infrequently to draw those chemistries. Not speaking from experience or anything, but yeah, that is a real consideration. Make sure you got the right chemistries hooked up to it in a quantity that makes sense for how you're using it. And then the testing you mentioned too, Angus, that tends to get overlooked for departments that are going to use it as occasionally we might put instruments through it. So they've got this giant cart in their decontamination area that's collecting dust, just sitting over in the corner for the once a month, once every other month random time where we have overflow. But when that overflow happens, it's difficult to say, all right, we got to test that washer today because we're going to use it as an instrument washer today. Or maybe some departments don't test it at all. So yeah, having a plan in place for how you're going to test the thing. Jamie, have you already got your new cart washer set up, or is it on the way?
Nope, it's set up, ready to go. I take possession of everything Monday, doing my first walkthrough on Tuesday with, I'm not going to lie, I was over there yesterday pushing all kinds of buttons and making things run just to see if it was working. But
You sound like me.
So this car washer, like I said, it's completely different. And I'm looking at all these racks. I'm like, what am I using this for? And I said, I just need containers. And I went, oh my, and then the light bulb goes off, right? Well, wait a minute. I can use this for instruments. What if I have a whole bunch of vendor trays coming through? Why not knock it out all in one thing? And then I had to rethink wait, how am I going to test it? Am I going to run tests a certain way this time versus that time? Should I do it all the time? Writing an SOP, I have to do the standard work on it, because I'm going from a tiny facility to this major facility. We're really building out, and it's going to be so new to the entire team. They're not even going to know what to do with it. When we were building, I was walking through it as a hallway. So now we're actually going to be utilizing it. So it's pretty fancy. Better not break down.
Don't say that out loud.
Test it till it breaks. Test it till it breaks.
That's why I told him, I said, give me 30 days to run every one of these pieces of equipment into the ground before I put a patient involved.
Yeah. Yeah, it's smart. And you look through the cycles programmed on some of these things and you think, what in the world would I use that for? Like washing beds and washing patient equipment and all kinds of things that I'm sure departments are using them for. Most often what I've seen going around to departments, and I'm sure both of you have seen the same, is they get a very capable instrument washer with grand dreams of using this cart washer as an instrument washer. And then they discover that their cycle takes an awfully long time to do it. And there's a reason they bought a cart washer in the first place, and that was to wash carts. And if you tie it up for 45 minutes running vendor trays through it, then your carts get really backed up and decontam doesn't run the way that, so they're like, it honestly suits us better just to keep the carts moving through and then pile up the vendor trays to work their way through our instrument washers. So, it's worth thinking through from a workflow perspective. How is it actually going to get used? And for the departments that have the cart washer that does instruments and they've got the instrument cart in the room, deciding whether or not you're going to run those instrument tests, because a lot of departments are just using it as a cart washer, and they have that rack in the decontam room. And I ask them, hey, like, do you have an instrument cycle programmed with a cart capable of running instruments on it with technicians who've been trained to run an instrument cycle on that cart washer? And they're like, yeah, but we don't use it. I'm like, yeah, but could somebody tomorrow roll some instruments in there and run it? Like, do you have it set up for that? And they're like, well, yeah. Like, then you should be testing it as an instrument washer. So either deprogram the cycle or roll the cart out of the room if you don't want Joint Commission asking you to show them the instrument tests for that big washer. So really important to make sure that you consider that. Thinking about other like knowledge gaps or misconceptions about cart washers, Angus, besides this instrument conversation, are, preventive maintenance. Is there anything specific about how you should treat your cart washer to make sure that you're compliant and that the thing keeps running?
Yeah, you treat it just like how you would treat the regular washers or sterilizers. Regular routine PMs based off of what the manufacturer recommends. Also, the inside must be clean too. So I'll be the first to admit, I do have some reservations when I do see people using the cart washers for instruments, because think about it. You're running carts with the wheels that we mentioned earlier, right? Mm-hmm. In the washer, those wheels after a while break down. They carry a lot of dirt, stuff like that. That tends to get into crevices in the cart washer. And then you also have the scale that kind of builds up depending on the type of water you have. And if you're thinking about transference, if you're going to be running instruments through this, right, you could be possibility transferring a lot of that stuff onto the instruments.
Yeah.
And you may be trying to do something good, but inadvertently doing something bad. So that's something that people really need to take a look at. It's always in the back of my head when I see it happening. And I do ask people about it, and they, you kind of get a half answer, but it's something that you gotta always have it there thinking about it, because, you don't want to have a good intention turned out pretty bad.
Right. Yeah. You actually made a comment about scaling, right? Yeah. Because that's a huge maintenance piece that I think a lot of people miss, even with their washers. I mean, I've gone into facilities where, did that not cross your mind, right? That you still have to maintain any type of washing mechanism, sonic machines, washers, cart washers. So what is with your experience, I mean, I know mine, but with your experience, Angus, what's some of the descaling purposes or resources that you've used to even know that you need that if nobody ever told you,
Well, if you got, the stainless steel, how stainless steel is supposed to shine, right? Yeah. Well, when you look at that and it has a very tinge looking color and you're in an area with bad water quality, you really shouldn't be instituting a descaler program. I've seen people do it where they're pouring and, I've heard manufacturers say this, oh, you can just pour. No, we're not going to do that. So I've had it programmed into my machines. So it's already set program. All they got to do is push the button, make sure the racks are loaded up.
Yeah. I've seen it both ways, and you're right. Those manufacturer instructions are what you got to follow. And some of the older ones don't have a plunger for the disinfection descaling cycle. And you read the IFU and it tells you how many ounces to pour into the drain and run that in and recirculates it. And that's what's wild about these cart washers is certain cycles recirculate the water. And so your point about the wheels breaking down and that stuff maybe getting deposited onto instruments, it's a worthwhile challenge to talk to a prospective cart wash manufacturer about, talk me through, how does the water management on this equipment work? Where does the water get stored? How much does it get reused? And specifically, what happens with the water when I run the instrument cycle? Because I totally hear you. I've heard of facilities that have had some black fleck issues in their trays, and they traced it. One of the problems back was they were getting particulates from their cart washer sprayed into the bottom of their containers, which were being washed in their cart washer. And when they started maintaining their cart washer or their cart wheels better, that solved their black speck in the OR problem in the surgical trays. And so, it comes from all sorts of issues, but we don't want to say that it's never wise to use the instrument washer, but you're right. Definitely challenge and have conversations with that manufacturer to make sure that what we're doing is a good idea. We are unfortunately out of time here, Angus. I've got a few more questions about cart washers, and I know that folks do as well. So I guess I'll encourage them to reach out to you directly on LinkedIn to continue the cart washer conversation. But hey, I wanted to say thanks for coming on here, telling us about your experience both in the industry and helping us dive a little bit deeper on cart washers today.
Oh, you're welcome. Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And that was Angus Bruce, Enterprise Director for SPD out at Boston Children's Hospital, sharing with his experience about cart washers from the old days of tunnel washers to single chamber, back to tunnel washers, and everything in between. And I hope it was a helpful episode for you listeners thinking about your own cart wash processes, or maybe if you're considering a cart wash in the future, some of the things that you need to think about. Jamie, one of the things that I thought was a really helpful conversation was that user maintenance piece of it, because like making sure that the cart washer is working the way that it intended, particularly if you're using it as an instrument washer, can have real impacts on patients and on the success of surgeries in the OR. One of the ones that we didn't get to talk about all that much, but is just as important, is looking in your operator's manual for those user maintenance steps and following those, including checking the filters. That seems to be the one that gets overlooked the most, at least in facilities that I go into. And it is a surefire way to have problems out of your cart wash, is just not lifting up that floor panel and scooping up all the debris out of the filters, because it's going to have bits of paper in there, the little pieces of plastic from your rigid container locks, and chunks of cart wheels. There's going to be stuff in there. So make sure that you stay on top of it. But really insightful interview today.
Yeah, it definitely was. And I think a lot of that is missed. Like you said, it's some of these cart washers have 3 filters, and are you checking them? Are you making sure that you're testing each cycle if there's multiple cycles on it, and then when you look at that instrument cycle, that's got to be a number one priority if you're definitely running instruments through that. If it's not safe, it's not going to be safe patient care you're providing. So those are all key points.
Yeah. One of the things that has me curious, just wondering where standards are headed. I do wonder if cart washers that are just being used for washing carts are going to get to the place where we're having required cleanliness testing done on those cart washers. I've seen cart wash tests out in the market where you can check them. Some of them are just wetness tests. Like if you get it wet, it'll tell you that and so you're just making sure that the cart washer is spraying effectively. But I do wonder if there's going to be more testing like that on cart washers in the future. But to Angus's point, if we're using it for instruments,
thank you for listening to this week's episode of Beyond Clean. As a reminder, you can help support us by subscribing to Beyond Clean on your favorite podcast app, or by downloading the smartphone app on iPhone or Android. Simply search for Beyond Clean in the App Store or Google Play. The best thing about downloading the smartphone app is that you can access bonus content for certain episodes and view episodes in certain categories, like articles on the go and vendor spotlights. Are you following us on LinkedIn or Facebook yet?
Yep.
If you are and you love an episode or post, then let your social network know about it. Like, comment, or share our posts along with your thoughts and keep the conversation going. If you have any topics or guests that you would like to recommend for a future episode, just send us an email to info@beyondclean.net. We look forward to hearing from you.
Idea around around knowledge gaps for cart washers and you want to let the industry know about it, we, of course, want to hear from you over at info@beyondclean.net. Definitely send us an email and we'll continue that conversation with you then. Until we talk to you again next week, though, on behalf of Jamie, myself, and the whole team here at Beyond Clean, keep fighting dirty.